Hello, my name is William Bradley, 37 years old. I am a Major General in the United States Army, known worldwide as a cybersecurity genius. But today, as I stand before the mirror in this luxurious hotel room, I see only a man in a simple black suit, trying to recall what it feels like to belong to a family. I'm not the type to talk about myself. My job is to keep secrets, not flaunt them. But if you ask, I'll keep it brief. I graduated top of my class from West Point Military Academy, earned a master's in cybersecurity from Johns Hopkins, and was awarded an honorary doctorate by MIT. I've led international cyber operations like Sentinel Fire, founded the Ghost Grid unit, testified before Congress, and been honored by NATO for contributions that remain unseen, things that happen in the shadows to protect the light. Currently, I serve as the Director of Cyber Strategy, Integration, and Defense Relations at the U.S. Army Cyber Command. In simple terms, I'm the one leading the U.S. Army's cybersecurity operations, overseeing defense contracts worth billions of dollars. But no one in my family knows this. And today, I return not as a general, but simply as Will, the eldest son, the older brother, the one my family thinks is just a lowly soldier. I stand in front of the 5-star Grand Elysium Hotel, where my younger brother Brian is about to hold his wedding. The building is as magnificent as a palace, with pristine white marble columns, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and a red carpet stretching from the entrance to the main hall. The soft strains of jazz music drift from inside, mingling with the laughter and chatter of elite guests. I take a deep breath, adjust my tie, and feel the cool touch of my West Point ring on my finger. This is my promise to my mother, that I wouldn't miss Brian's big day, even though it's been nearly 10 years since I've come home. 10 years since I chose my own path, leaving behind the glamour of my family to live in military bases, frigid server rooms, and long nights facing invisible threats in cyberspace. My family is not an ordinary one. My father, James Bradley, is the CEO of Nexora Dynamics, a colossal tech conglomerate that supplies software and equipment to the defense, healthcare, and finance industries. He's a tall man with salt and pepper hair, always dressed in bespoke suits exuding natural authority. My mother, Helen, is a gentle yet sharp-witted woman, quietly serving as my father's confidant. And Brian, my younger brother, is the CFO of the company, a younger version of our father, smart, ambitious, and always knowing how to charm a crowd. They are giants in the eyes of others, the architects of a billion-dollar empire. And me? I'm the only one who turned down the offer to join the family business, rejecting the opportunity to get rich, to live a life they'll never understand. I step into the banquet hall where over 300 guests are gathered. The air is thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the clinking of wine glasses, and the shimmer of evening gowns under the lights. A young woman in a hotel staff uniform greets me, checks my invitation, and points me toward table 17, tucked away in a far corner of the hall. I smile, thank her, but a sharp pang stabs at my chest. Table 17. Not the head table, not near the stage, but a side table reserved for unimportant guests. I'm not surprised, but it still feels like someone just slipped a small knife into my heart. As I make my way to the table, a few glances follow me. A cousin, an old family friend, some strangers. They nod politely, but I can see the curiosity mixed with pity in their eyes. "That's Will, the eldest Bradley son," I hear a woman whisper to her companion. "They say he's still in the military. Such a shame. With that mind, he could have done so much more." I pretend not to hear, pull out a chair at table 17 and sit down. The other guests at the table are engrossed in lively discussions about the stock market and real estate. They glance at me, offer polite smiles, then quickly return to their conversation, as if my presence is just a passing breeze. I look toward the stage where Brian stands, radiant in a black tuxedo, hand in hand with his bride, Emily. She's beautiful, with shimmering blonde hair and a warm smile. Brian laughs heartily, responding to a joke from our father, who stands beside him, raising a glass to the guests. The entire hall seems to revolve around them, the Bradleys, the successful, the respected. I take a sip of water, feeling a faint bitterness in my throat, not from the drink but from memories. Growing up, Brian and I were close. We were raised in a large house in suburban Virginia with a sprawling lawn and a sparkling blue pool. Our father always taught us about integrity, about living in a way that honored the family name. "You must do what's right no matter how hard it is," he'd say over dinner, his gaze stern yet warm. I believed him, believed in those values. So when I grew up, I chose West Point, chose the Army, chose a path I thought would make him proud. But I was wrong. When I announced my decision to enlist, my father looked at me as if I'd betrayed him. "The Army?" he said, his voice low. "You want to spend your life in barracks earning pennies when you could be in a corner office overlooking the Potomac?" Brian, just 18 at the time, stood behind him, shrugging with a grin. "If you want to play hero, go ahead," he said, half joking, half serious. From then on, the distance between me and my family grew. I threw myself into my work, from grueling training at West Point to sleepless nights coding in Pentagon server rooms. I climbed the ranks, from captain to major, then colonel, and finally major general at 36, one of the youngest officers to reach that rank. I led Operation Sentinel Fire, thwarting a cyber attack from a hostile nation, saving millions of sensitive data points. I founded Ghost Grid, an elite unit tackling global cyber threats. I stood before Congress answering tough questions about national security and received a medal from NATO in a ceremony I hoped my family would attend. But they didn't. I sent emails, invitations, but got only silence, no replies. My mother occasionally called asking, "When are you coming to work for the company, Willie?" My father was blunter. "When you're done playing soldier, just let me know." I scan the banquet hall where everyone is clapping as Brian and Emily cut the wedding cake. Camera flashes light up their beaming faces. I smile, but inside a storm rages. I'm not angry at my family. I'm used to being misunderstood. But I can't deny the hurt, like a small but deep cut every time I hear someone call me the lowly soldier or the Bradley family's worst choice. I wonder, do they ever consider that I chose this path not out of foolishness, but because I believed in it? That I don't need wealth or fame to feel my life has value? A middle-aged man in a colonel's uniform suddenly approaches my table. I recognize him, Colonel Mark Reynolds, a colleague from the Ghost Grid operation. He stands at attention, saluting me with clear respect. "Major General Bradley, it's an honor to see you here, sir," he says, his voice carrying over the noisy room. A few heads turn, curious. I stand, shake his hand, and smile. "Mark, it's been a while." "Still doing all right?" I ask, keeping my tone light. He nods, his eyes still full of admiration. "Fit as a fiddle, sir. And you? I heard you wrapped up a major project with NATO." I laugh, shaking my head. "Today, I'm just a guest, Mark. No work, just family." As Mark leaves, I sit back down, feeling the stares from the nearby table. A woman, likely a friend of my mother's, whispers to her companion, "Major General? Must be a mistake. Will, a general? No way." I don't respond, just take another sip of water, the cold liquid sliding down my throat. I don't need to explain. In a week at Nexora Dynamics headquarters, I'll see my father and Brian again in a meeting they won't expect. Then I won't need to say anything. My Major General's uniform and the authority in my hands will speak for me. The wedding continues with dances, speeches, and toasts. I sit quietly watching. My father takes the stage, raising a glass, speaking of Brian with unconcealed pride. "My son, an exceptional man, has taken Nexora Dynamics to new heights," he says, his voice resounding. "Thank you all for sharing this special day." The crowd applauds. I clap too, but inside I wonder, if he knew who I am, would he mention me? My father continues, expounding on his success and pride in Brian. I stand and step out onto the balcony. The city stretches before me, its lights twinkling like artificial stars. I breathe in the night air, the cool breeze soothing my mind. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here because of my promise to my mother, because I still love my family even if they don't understand me. But deep down, I know today is just the beginning. In a week at Nexora Dynamics meeting, everything will change. I won't shout or blame. I'll let the truth speak for itself. I pull out my phone and open an old email, the invitation I sent my parents for my NATO medal ceremony 3 years ago. No reply. I give a sad smile, turn off the screen, and step back inside. The night is still long and I'm ready to face it, as I've faced every challenge in my life. Brian's wedding stretched late into the night, but I didn't stay until the end. As the chandelier lights in the Grand Elysium's ballroom began to dim and the last glasses of wine were poured, I quietly slipped away. The music still echoed behind me, blending with the laughter of elite guests, but I just wanted to escape the stifling atmosphere. I stepped outside, my breath mingling with the cold night air. The city remained dazzling, but inside me was an emptiness. Not anger, but a smoldering sadness, like an old wound being prodded. I'm not angry at my family. Truly. I've learned to accept that they don't understand me, don't understand the path I've chosen. But what hurts is the way they see me. As a failure, a 37-year-old man still lost in the military while my father and brother are kings of the business world. They call me the lowly soldier, as if the past 10 years I've spent polishing boots in a barracks waiting for a paycheck. They don't know I'm a major general, don't know I hold the authority to approve defense contracts their corporation covets. And I'm not going to say anything. Not yet. I take a taxi back to my parents' estate, where I'll stay for a few days before returning to base. The house lies in the suburbs, a sprawling mansion with intricately carved iron gates, lush green lawns, and a pool glimmering under the moonlight. When I was a child, we lived in a more modest home, but after Nexora Dynamics took off, my parents bought this place, a symbol of their success. I step inside, my shoes echoing on the marble floor. The housekeeper, Clara, greets me with a warm smile. "Will, it's been so long," she says, her voice full of affection. I smile, thank her, but deep down, I know her welcome might be the only warmth I'll find here. The living room is vast, with soaring ceilings and expensive paintings on the walls. I pause, looking around. On an ebony shelf sit ornate picture frames. My father and Brian at a tech conference, Brian receiving his MBA from Wharton. My father on the cover of Forbes with the headline, "Pioneer of the Future." No trace of me. Not a single photo, not a medal, not a hint of William Bradley, the eldest son who chose the military over the corporation. I once sent my mother a photo from my major promotion ceremony, me in uniform, standing before the American flag, shaking hands with a NATO general. She didn't hang it. Perhaps she thought it didn't match the style of the house. I walk to a corner of the room where an old photo sits, lightly dusted. It's our family when I was about 10, Brian just 6. My father has his arm around my shoulders, my mother holds Brian's hand, and all 4 of us are beaming in a park. I touch the frame, memories flooding back. Back then, my father used to talk to me about integrity, about doing what's right even if the world turns its back. "Will, you have to be a man who stands tall," he'd say, his eyes alight. I believed him, lived by those words. But now, he's the one who looks at me like a failure. I hear footsteps. My mother enters from the doorway wearing a silk robe, her silver hair glinting under the light. "Willie, you're back early?" she says, her voice gentle but hesitant. I nod, smiling. "Yes, Mom. The wedding was beautiful, but I'm a bit tired." She steps forward to hug me, then quickly changes the subject. "Brian was wonderful, wasn't he? Emily's such a lovely girl, they'll be so happy." I nod, but inside I wonder, does she ever think about my happiness? I head upstairs to my room, a spacious bedroom with a large bed and windows overlooking the pool. I sit down, open my suitcase, and pull out a classified file on Project Helios, the defense contract Nexora Dynamics is chasing. I skim through it, jot down a few notes, then tuck it away. In a week, I'll meet my father and Brian at the corporation's headquarters, not as a son or brother, but as Major General William Bradley, the one who holds the fate of this project in his hands. I don't want to think about it now. I just want to sleep, to forget the condescending glances at the wedding. The next morning, I wake early and jog around the garden. The air is fresh, but my mind remains heavy. When I return to the house, I find my father at the dining table reading a financial newspaper. He looks up, nods. "Will," he says curtly, "sit, have breakfast." I pull out a chair and sit across from him. My mother brings a plate of eggs and toast, smiling but silent. The atmosphere is quiet, broken only by the clink of cutlery on plates. "What did you think of the wedding?" my father asks, eyes still on his paper. "It was beautiful," I reply. Brian looked happy. He nods, folds the paper, and finally looks at me. "And you? Still working in the military?" His voice carries a hint of hesitation, as if he's unsure whether to ask. I smile faintly. "Yes, still there." I don't elaborate. No mention of my rank, no talk of NATO, no stories of the nights I stayed up thwarting cyber attacks. I know he wouldn't care. He sips his coffee, then says, his tone calm but cutting, "You know, Will, sometimes I wonder what you're doing with your life. Brian's achieved so much, pulling in 6 figures a month, and you're still there in the barracks, living a life I don't understand." I grip my fork tightly, feeling anger rise, but I hold it back. "I like my work," I say evenly. He scoffs, shaking his head. "Work? That's not work, Will. It's a hobby. One day you'll realize what real responsibility is. When you do, just tell me. I'll arrange a good position for you at the company." I don't respond. I just look at him, the man who once taught me about integrity, now telling me my life is a joke. My mother sits beside us, silent, her eyes flickering between me and my father. Finally, she speaks, her voice soft. "James, enough. Will has his own path." But my father waves her off. "Helen, you don't understand. Will has potential, but he's wasting it. He's not like Brian." Those words hit like a knife. I stand politely, saying, "I'm full. Thank you, Mom." I leave the table, feeling my father's gaze on my back. I don't turn around. I don't want him to see my eyes stinging. That afternoon, I visit Brian at his downtown office. I want to congratulate him, to feel some trace of the brotherhood we once had. His office is on the 40th floor of a glass skyscraper with a panoramic view of the city. He sits behind a large desk, dressed in a gray suit, studying a financial chart on his screen. When he sees me, he stands, smiling. "Will, didn't expect you," he says, shaking my hand. But the handshake feels cold, like one between strangers. "Congratulations," I say, sitting across from him. "The wedding was great." Brian grins, leaning back in his chair. "Thanks. Emily and I planned it for a year. Cost a fortune, but worth it." He looks at me, curiosity in his eyes. "And you? Still in the military?" That question again. I nod. "Yeah, still there." Brian laughs, but the laugh lacks warmth. "You're one of a kind, Will. Dad's right. You could do so much more, but you choose to stay there. Why? Like the hero vibe?" I look at him, my little brother, who used to chase me around the garden, begging me to teach him how to throw a ball. Now he sees me as a loser. "I like my work," I say evenly. Brian shrugs. "Suit yourself, but you know the world runs on money and power. The military doesn't give you that. If you change your mind, let me know. I can get you a position, nothing fancy, but enough to start over." I smile, but inside a storm rages. I don't need his position. I don't need his pity. In a week, he'll see me in my Major General's uniform, sitting at the head of the meeting table, deciding the fate of the contract he and my father are pouring their hearts into. But for now, I just nod. "Thanks," I say, standing. "I've got to go. Wishing you happiness." As I leave his office, the elevator carries me to the ground floor, and my heart feels heavy. Not because of Brian's words, but because the truth is my family is no longer the one I knew. They don't see me. They don't want to see me. I step onto the street, take a deep breath, and tell myself, one more week, everything will change. That evening, I return to the estate. My parents are hosting a few friends, wealthy business people, acquaintances from high society. I plan to slip upstairs quietly, but my mother calls out. "Will, come in, meet everyone," she says cheerfully. I enter the living room, where people lounge on sofas, wine glasses in hand. My father introduces me, but his voice lacks enthusiasm. "This is Will, my eldest son. He's serving in the military. A man, likely a friend of my father's, laughs loudly. The military? Really? You didn't want to work with your dad? Nixora Dynamics is dominating the market. The others chuckle as if it's a joke. I smile politely, saying, I like my work. But they don't stop. A woman wearing glittering pearl earrings chimes in. Oh, what a pity. With Bradley jeans, you should be a billionaire by now. My father laughs, sipping his wine. Exactly, but Will, he wants to be a lowly soldier. I don't know what he's thinking. The room erupts in laughter at my father's mocking remark. I stand there, each word hitting me like a stone. I want to shout, to tell them I'm a major general, that I wield power they can't imagine. But I don't. I nod, excuse myself, and leave. Upstairs, I close my bedroom door, sit on the bed, my heart pounding. I lie back, staring at the ceiling. One more week, I tell myself. One more week, and they'll see. After 3 days at my parents' house, I began packing to return to work. Before I left, my father shook my hand and said, If you change your mind, just call me. His voice even. Nixora Dynamics always has a place for you. I nodded, saying nothing. I didn't need his place. I had built my own path, and in 1 week he would see. I returned to my apartment near the Pentagon, a modest, unassuming place with white walls, an old desk, and a bookshelf filled with classified documents. I started checking emails and preparing for the meeting at Nixora Dynamics. I wasn't nervous. I was used to pressure, used to boardrooms filled with powerful people, their eyes fixed on me, waiting for a decision that could change the world. But this time was different. This time I would face my father and Brian not as a son or brother, but as Major General William Bradley, the one holding the power over their biggest project. The day before the meeting, I stopped by my office at the military base. The atmosphere there always carried a unique weight. The clatter of keyboards, the crackle of radio communications, and the tense silence of people who knew every decision could save or destroy millions of lives. A colonel named John walked in holding a stack of documents. Major General, the final report on Project Helios, he said, placing the folder on my desk. I nodded, skimming the pages. Thank you, John. Anything unusual? He shook his head. No, sir, but Nixora Dynamics seems to be struggling with their cost structure. There are some unclear expenses. I frowned, reading closer. Brian was in charge of the project's finances. If there were errors, it was his responsibility. I nodded, telling John, Keep this quiet. I'll handle it at the meeting. The next morning, I put on my Major General's dress uniform, a deep blue suit adorned with gleaming insignia on the chest. I looked at myself in the mirror, feeling the weight of my rank, my responsibility. I didn't wear this to show off. I wore it because this was me, William Bradley, the man who chose this path, even when the world turned its back. I got into the car and my driver took me to Nixora Dynamics headquarters, a shimmering glass skyscraper in the heart of the city. As the car stopped, I took a deep breath and stepped out. Today, everything would change. I entered the main lobby where the receptionist greeted me with curious eyes. Major General Bradley, this way, please, a young assistant said, leading me to the boardroom on the top floor. I felt the stares from employees, from people who didn't know who I was but noticed the rank on my uniform. They whispered, pointed, but I didn't care. My thoughts were on my father and Brian, on what they would feel when they saw me walk in. The boardroom was expansive, with a long ebony table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My father sat at one end of the table, dressed in a gray suit, talking with a few executives. Brian sat beside him, checking documents on his iPad, looking tense but confident. The chairman of the board, Robert Callahan, stood at the head of the table, shaking my hand as I entered. Robert was an old friend, someone I'd worked with during a NATO operation. He smiled, his eyes full of respect. "Will, good to see you," he said warmly. I nodded, smiling back. "Good to see you, Robert." I took my seat, feeling the room's atmosphere shift. My father looked up and saw me. His eyes flickered with surprise, then quickly turned away as if he didn't want to acknowledge my presence. Brian glanced at me, frowned, then leaned over to whisper something to an executive beside him. I knew what they were thinking. What's Will doing here? In a uniform? Probably just some minor military representative. I said nothing, just placed my folder on the table and waited. Robert stood, tapping the table lightly to draw attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to discuss Project Helios, a critical defense contract with the Department of Defense, he began, his voice resonant. And I'm honored to introduce the representative from the military, the one with final approval authority for this project. He turned to me, smiling. Major General William J. Bradley, Director of Cyber Strategy Integration and Defense Relations, U.S. Army Cyber Command. The room fell silent. I felt every pair of eyes lock onto me like invisible bullets. My father looked up, his coffee cup frozen midair. Brian whipped around, his mouth agape, eyes wide with disbelief. The other executives whispered, some flipping through their documents as if to confirm it was really me. I sat straight, meeting Robert's gaze, nodding slightly. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. I'm ready to begin. My father coughed, trying to regain his composure. Will, he said, his voice trembling. You're a major general? I looked at him, my gaze calm but sharp. Yes, sir. Brian shook his head, muttering, No way. But Robert cut in, his tone firm. Major General Bradley is one of the world's leading cybersecurity experts. We're fortunate to have him here today. My heart pounded, not from nerves but from a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. I had waited for this moment, the moment when my father and Brian realized I wasn't the lowly soldier. But at the same time, a deep sadness settled in. Why did it take this moment for them to see me? Why did I have to wear this uniform, stand in this boardroom for them to recognize my worth? The boardroom at Nexora Dynamics headquarters still buzzed with whispers as I took charge of the discussion. Seated at the head of the table, my Major General's dress uniform immaculate, my gaze swept across the faces. Executives in expensive suits, assistants scribbling furiously, and my father and Brian, both frozen in silence. I didn't let personal feelings creep into my work. Not today, not here. I was Major General William Bradley, and I had a mission. To ensure Project Helios wasn't just a billion-dollar contract, but an impenetrable cybersecurity system protecting millions. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady but carrying the weight of authority. Project Helios is not merely a tech project. It is the backbone of national security. Every detail, from code to costs, must be scrutinized thoroughly. I need Nexora Dynamics to provide clear explanations of its security strategy and financial structure. Where shall we start? My eyes locked onto Brian, unwavering. Brian, my younger brother, who just a week ago mocked me as the soldier playing hero, now fumbled with his tie. He glanced at our father as if seeking rescue, but my father sat silently, his gaze fixed on the table, hands gripping his pen tightly. Major General, Brian started, his voice faltering. We've optimized the cost structure for maximum efficiency. All expenses are fully reported. He slid a stack of documents toward me, but I could see the tension in his movements. His hands trembled slightly, and I knew. He wasn't certain. I flipped through the documents, my eyes scanning the numbers, but my mind already recalled the irregularities Colonel John had flagged. The $47 million expenditure for the Singapore subsidiary, I said, my voice calm but sharp. It's not clearly justified. Can you elaborate on its purpose? I looked at Brian, not as his brother, but as the man controlling the fate of this project. The room fell so silent I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Brian swallowed hard, flipping through his papers, scrambling for an answer. It's an investment for auxiliary research, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Auxiliary research, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Do you have a detailed report on the outcomes of this research? Because according to military data, that subsidiary hasn't conducted any Helios-related research in the past 2 years. I slid another document toward him, an analysis from my team at Cyber Command. Brian paled. An executive nearby coughed, trying to break the tense atmosphere. My father finally looked up, his eyes darting between me and Brian as if he couldn't believe the scene unfolding. I didn't look at him. I didn't want to see disappointment or shame in his eyes. I was just doing my job as I had for the past 10 years, putting duty above emotion. Major General, another executive, Eleanor Hayes, spoke up, her voice cautious. We'll review this expenditure and provide a full report. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I expect that report within 48 hours. National security doesn't tolerate misunderstandings. I emphasized the last word and the room seemed to hold its breath. I pressed on, questioning not just the costs but the security strategy. I asked Nixora's technical team to present the system's source code, pointing out a potential vulnerability in the encryption protocol. If an enemy exploits this flaw, the entire network could collapse within hours, I said, my voice icy. I need a remediation plan immediately. The engineers nodded frantically, scribbling notes. Brian sat silently, his eyes fixed on the table as if willing himself to disappear. My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse as if it took effort to get the words out. Major General, he corrected himself. We'll ensure everything is addressed. Nixora Dynamics is fully committed to working with the Department of Defense. I nodded, meeting his eyes for the first time in the meeting. I trust that commitment, Mr. Bradley, I said, my tone professional. Hearing my father call me Major General in front of the entire board filled me with an indescribable sense of confidence and pride. The meeting stretched on for 3 hours, and I ran it with the precision of someone accustomed to command. Every question, every demand was aimed at ensuring Project Helios met the highest standards. But I wasn't vindictive, didn't let personal feelings interfere. I wasn't here to settle scores with my father or Brian. I was here to do what was right, as my father had taught me when I was young. Though now, he seemed to have forgotten his own lesson. As the meeting ended, the executive stood, shaking my hand with evident respect. One whispered to another, I didn't know Bradley's son was a Major General. Impressive, I heard but didn't respond. I gathered my documents, preparing to leave when Robert Callahan, the board chairman, patted my shoulder. You did great, Will, he said warmly. I always knew you were special. I smiled, thanked him, but inside I just wanted to leave the room, the stares, the whispers. My father and Brian didn't leave immediately. They lingered as if waiting for something. I knew they wanted to talk, but I wasn't sure I was ready. I stepped into the hallway, feeling the cool air from the high windows. An assistant hurried after me, offering a glass of water. Major General, Mr. Callahan invites you to his private office for further discussion, she said. I nodded, knowing it wasn't just about work. It would be a confrontation with my family, one I'd delayed for too long. Robert's office was at the corner of the building with large windows overlooking the city skyline. When I entered, my father, Brian, and even my mother were there. Robert stood behind his desk, giving a slight smile. I'll let your family talk, he said, then left, closing the door. The room fell silent. I stood there, still in my uniform, feeling the weight of the moment. My father looked at me, his eyes a mix of surprise and shame. My mother sat on the sofa, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Brian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. Will, my father began, his voice trembling. Why didn't you say anything about this? He gestured at my uniform, the insignia on my chest. I looked at him, the hurt from the past days rising, but I kept my voice steady. I did, Dad. I sent invitations to my promotion ceremonies. I emailed about Sentinel Fire, the NATO medal. I sent photos when I was honored. No one replied. No one asked. My mother sobbed, covering her mouth. Willie, I didn't know. I thought you were just doing office work in the military. I didn't understand what you do. Her voice broke and my heart tightened. I wanted to step forward, hug her, tell her it was okay, but I couldn't. I just stood there looking at her, at my father, at Brian. Brian finally spoke, his voice quiet but sincere. "Will, I mean Major General," he corrected himself. "I was wrong. I mocked you, thought you weren't good enough. You deserve respect." I looked at him, seeing the shame in his eyes. Part of me wanted to forgive him instantly, to return to the days when we were close brothers. But another part of me still hurt. Hurt from years of being overlooked, belittled. My father stood, stepping closer to me. "Will," he said, his voice hoarse, "I thought you needed me to guide you. I thought you were wasting your potential. I was wrong." He paused, as if struggling for words. "I'm proud of you." It was the first time in 10 years he'd said that. I looked at him, feeling a spark of warmth mixed with sadness. "I just wanted to be respected for the path I chose," I said, my voice low. "Not because I rejected yours." My father nodded, his eyes misty as if replaying the past years. "You're right," he said softly. "I didn't see you. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I just nodded, turned away, my heart heavy. I wasn't here to win or make them feel guilty. I just wanted them to see me, truly see me, not through the lens of money or fame. I left the office, stepping into the hallway, the sunlight from the windows warming my face. A week ago, I was the lowly soldier. Today, I was Major General William Bradley, the man who silenced a boardroom. But deep down, I was still just Will, the son, the brother, forever hoping that one day his family would understand. I returned to my apartment near the Pentagon, where the small, familiar space helped me find calm. I took off my uniform, hung it on the rack, feeling its weight lift from my shoulders, but the weight in my heart lingered. At my desk, I opened my laptop, checking emails from Colonel John. The latest report on Project Helios confirmed my suspicions. Brian's cost structure had multiple gaps, not fraud, but poor management. I drafted a concise email to Robert Callahan, Nexora Dynamics chairman, urging them to rectify the issues before the Pentagon intervened. "This isn't intentional," I wrote, "but it needs immediate correction to ensure national security." I hit send, feeling a sense of relief for doing the right thing, not exposing my brother, but giving him a chance to fix his mistakes. The days that followed saw me dive back into work at Cyber Command, immersed in lines of code, classified briefings, and strategies to protect the nation's networks. But my family stayed on my mind. I thought of my mother, her tear-streaked eyes in Robert's office. I thought of my father, his trembling voice as he apologized. And I thought of Brian, my once close brother, now grappling with the fallout of his project's errors. A week after the meeting, I received an email from Brian. The subject was simply, "Thanks." I opened it, reading each line with a strange feeling. "Will," he wrote, "I've reviewed the entire cost structure for Helios as you requested. There were things I didn't handle well, and I'm fixing them. Thank you for not making a big deal out of it. I was wrong to underestimate you. If you have time, I'd like to meet. Just us brothers." I reread the email, a spark of warmth creeping into my heart. I replied briefly, "Good. I'm free this weekend. Let's meet at the old coffee shop." It was the small cafe in the suburbs where we used to sit for hours as kids, talking about naive dreams. Brian agreed immediately. I put my phone away, feeling a flicker of hope, though still cautious. I wanted to believe we could reconnect, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. That weekend, I arrived at the cafe, dressed in a shirt and jeans, no uniform, no insignia. I wanted to meet Brian not as a major general, but as his brother. He was already there, sitting in our old corner, a latte in front of him. When he saw me, he stood smiling, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. "Will," he said softly, "thanks for coming." We sat, talked. At first it was small talk, work, Emily, the weather, but then Brian took a deep breath, looked me in the eye. "Will, I'm sorry," he said. "I thought you weren't good enough. I was wrong. What you do, what you've achieved, I didn't know. I let my arrogance blind me." I looked at him, seeing sincerity in his eyes. "It's okay, Brian," I said. I don't need you to be proud of me, I just want you to respect the path I've chosen. He nodded, sipping his coffee. I've fixed the cost plan, he said. Robert says it's much better now, and I learned a lesson, not just about finances, but about responsibility. I smiled, feeling relieved. Good. You're smart, Brian. You'll do better. We kept talking about old times, silly fights, the dreams we once shared. As we left the cafe, I felt a part of the gap between us had closed. Not entirely, but enough to make me believe that one day we could be real brothers again. A few days later, I received another email, this time from my father. It was an internal Nexora Dynamics memo sent to all employees, but I was directly copied. Dear Nexora Dynamics team, he wrote, I want to share something I've recently realized. My son, Major General William Bradley, is an exceptional man, a leader in cybersecurity and a source of pride for our family. I underestimated him, and I apologize for that. We are fortunate to have him supporting Project Helios, and I hope we all learn from his integrity. I read the email, my eyes stinging. My father hadn't just apologized to me. He'd publicly acknowledged his mistake to hundreds of people. It was something I never thought he'd do. I called him. He answered immediately, his voice warmer than I remembered. Will, he said, did you get the email? I nodded, though he couldn't see. Yes, Dad, thank you. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I was wrong. I didn't see you. I want to make it right. When you're free, come home, okay? Your mom misses you. I smiled, feeling a burden lift. I'll come, Dad, soon. 6 months later, I returned to my parents' estate. The atmosphere was different. As I walked in, my mother rushed to hug me, her eyes sparkling. Willie, she said, her voice brimming with joy. I made apple pie for you. I laughed, hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. My father stood behind, shaking my hand, this time with a warmth that wasn't stiff. Good to see you, Will, he said. Brian was there too, with Emily. He clapped my shoulder, grinning. No meetings this time, Will, just family. We sat in the living room where a small but significant change caught my eye. On the wall, next to my father's Forbes cover and Brian's MBA diploma, was a new frame. It was the photo of me in uniform receiving my NATO medal. I looked at it, my heart warming. Who hung this? I asked softly. My mother smiled. Your father did. He said it's time our home was proud of all our children. That dinner was the first in years where I felt at home. We talked, laughed, and for the first time they asked about my work. My mother was curious about the military AI training program I was overseeing. Is it like in sci-fi movies, Willie? She asked, eyes gleaming. I laughed, explaining simply, knowing she only half understood but nodded anyway. My father asked about Operation Sentinel Fire, and for the first time he listened. Truly listened. Brian shared that he'd applied one of my encryption suggestions to a Nexora Dynamics project. It worked better than I expected, he said, his voice full of admiration. You're a genius. As dinner ended, I stepped out to the garden, gazing at the pool shimmering under the moonlight. My mother joined me, bringing a jacket. It's chilly, Willie, she said, draping it over my shoulders. I smiled, thanked her. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice soft but certain. Not because you're a major general, but because you're my son. I looked at her, my eyes stinging. I know, Mom, I said, thank you. I felt a peace I hadn't thought possible. My family wasn't perfect, we'd lost years understanding each other, and the scars remained. But at least we were trying, and maybe that was what mattered most. A few days later, I returned to the familiar rhythm of being a major general. As I unpacked my suitcase in my office, I found a handwritten letter neatly tucked beneath my uniform. It was my mother's handwriting. Willie, she wrote, I'm proud of you. Not because you're a major general, but because you're my son. Love you. I smiled, placing the letter beside my medal on the desk. In that moment, I felt a spark of hope. My family was learning to see me, and I was learning to let go of the past and live for the brighter days ahead.